By the way, Sunday, turn the clocks ahead 1 hour. It's that time this weekend.
I thought we were getting rid of that.
Spring ahead 1 hour.
The federal government was talking about it.
All the things they vote on, this is the thing they have not voted on.
Okay.
Right? And the first day of spring is actually March 20th. So that's what I love about March. The promise is there.
Yeah, we need it. We need spring.
Guest in studio is Brandon Truman. He's the chief of the Berkeley County Emergency Ambulance Authority. And I believe the first time we've had Brandon on the program today. Good to see you, man.
Likewise.
Thanks for coming in. How long have you been in your current position, Brandon?
So started last year in March. So coming up about a year, first year in the role.
Yeah, now you're a local guy, right?
I am. Yeah, born and raised here in the county. Still live on a family farm I grew up on.
That's nice.
Never left.
What do you do? Is it a cattle farm, or are you growing crops and stuff?
It's livestock. So we have Angus, and then on my the other side of the family, on the Thatcher Road side, has an equestrian center to do horse boarding and training.
Now, it's tradition for guests when they come in to bring food. Did you bring steaks?
I left them in the car, actually. I can run out and grab them real quick.
It might be cold enough out there for them.
You can eat steaks, John, right?
I can eat steaks. I'm just not eating sweets or anything like that.
Yeah, all right, that's fair. And Brandon, so I got an email about a week ago or so that said, hey, we talk a lot about emergency services, but we've not gotten specifically into the ambulance authority because you guys are kind of your own separate game there. Tell me how that breaks out from the county emergency services and the county commission funding.
Sure. So, back in 1975, the state passed some legislation that is called the EMS Act of 1975. And then along with that, it kind of granted the county commission the authority to start an ambulance authority, contract with a private entity, employ the EMS staff. But we're actually one of the only public services that is required to be provided to a county, which is actually kind of cool. So it can be ran by the municipalities, but here in Berkeley County, the ambulance authority was started in 1988 with Gary Collis. He's a great guy. I got big shoes to fill there, and that's how we're formed. That's what we do.
Tell me about the fee.
Sure. So we actually have two. So we have a household fee, and that's a big part of our funding. So the residents, all living units in the county, get a fee for about $110. And comparatively speaking, it's actually relatively low. Of course, we have a high volume of residences compared to the folks around us. Morgan County runs about 150. Hardy County runs about 120. So with our higher volume, we try to keep it as reasonable as possible. And then we have a non-residential fee that was actually just started to be collected last year for the businesses in the county, and that's basically a square footage rate based on the number of folks that they have and the size of their location.
Now, the difference between a fee and a tax, as I understand it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, if you collect a fee, that fee goes to you. But if it becomes part of a tax, that has to be split among the school district and other entities, and then eventually you get a share of that. So it's actually more economical for you to have a fee than be part of a taxing system.
That is 100% correct. So we have an ordinance in the county that allows us to collect that fee, and you're right, it is separate from a tax. So because it is a fee, one, we can keep it lower because we get all of it. As much as we can collect. We actually collect about 80% of the bills that that we send out. But yes, that comes back specifically to us. It's in the ordinance that says that it has to come back to us, and then we can use that to fund our service.
And what is that total collection for you in a budget year?
So we're budgeted for about $4.2 million on the household fee. We just started with the non-residential fee, so we'll be on track to about $600,000 for that. So and that's only about half of our expenses. The other half we get through billing for the service that we provide. So we bill insurance companies, Medicare, Medicaid, commercial insurance, auto insurance, and we have staff that send those bills out.
And the budget expenses that you have during the course of the year, other than salaries and benefits and such, what other the expenses?
Sure. So obviously the salaries is the lion's share of of the budget, but as you can imagine, running 14 vehicles that drive each about 20,000 miles a year, it's a lot of fuel, it's a lot of maintenance. So we have a couple $100,000 that we spend in maintenance, a couple $100,000 in fuel. We have an extreme amount of capital requirements. An ambulance right now costs about $300,000 empty.
Wow.
And that's a reasonably priced ambulance. So we've done some pretty aggressive moves with how we design our fleet replacement plan. So now we don't just buy new. We buy good equipment. It's not the most expensive on the market, as you can imagine, but we've gotten to a place now where we can purchase a chassis and actually keep the box, raise the box off the chassis, pull the old chassis out, back a new chassis, and set that box down, refurb it, bring it all up to the new code and the new regulatory guidance that's established for us, and that saves us about $100,000. And we're trying to get about 4 to 5 remounts out of each box. So these are all the things that kind of happen, behind the scenes that that we do to try to keep our costs down.
How often, Brandon? How often do you have to replace the chassis?
So it's about our fleet replacement plan is based on about 8 years. So we try to keep it about 4 to 5 years in a frontline status, a couple years in a spare status, and then a couple years in a backup or reserve status. So that way the citizens are getting a good ambulance responding to them, a reliable ambulance, because as they get older, they have a lot of out of service time, and they're out of service. They're not available to respond to the citizens. So we have to have a certain amount of backup ambulances so that the new ones can go out for their regularly scheduled preventative maintenance.
So you run 14 ambulances around the county. How many square miles is our county again?
It's about 320 square miles.
That's amazing.
It is, and that's all inclusive. So that's 14 plus our spares. So we have 9 crews that are on at peak time, and peak time for us is Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then we drop one 12-hour truck on the weekends, and we go down to that. So
how many locations around the county do you have ambulances set up?
Yeah, great question. So we have 6. So we have 3 stations that we own. So that's Station 9-6, which is in Falling Waters. We have Station 9-7, which is the central part of the county, and we have Station 9-8, which is down the south end of the county. And we also partner with the volunteer firehouses, so we have MOUs with them that they allow us to put an ambulance in their station, which is a wonderful partnership for us. And we're really grateful for that relationship that we have. So we run an ambulance out of Station 50 in Back Creek. We run an ambulance out of Station 30 in Hedgesville, and an ambulance out of Station 49, which is Bennington.
It's like some of the I was at a client's house in the woods, and then I had another appointment on the other side of Back Creek Valley, still in the county. It took me 45 minutes from the woods to the other side of Back Creek Valley. You guys cover an amazing amount of distance.
We do, and it takes a lot of engineering, to design a deployment strategy that's going to cover that amount of ground with the amount of calls that we run. And right now, our average response time is under 9 minutes.
Yeah, because it's not like it's all flat land or it's all roads. It's not as the crow flies.
No, sometimes not all paved. So,
right.
Brad Knoll's shaking his head right now. Going,
Yeah.
I told you guys. I told you guys.
You mentioned 9 crews at peak time, 14 ambulances. With the growth in Berkeley County, how many more could you really use?
So yeah, that's another great question. So right now our main goal is to get 24 hours at Station 49. So Station 49 kind of covers our central to Spring Mills area, and as you can imagine, that is a huge area of growth for us. So they're on track. As an example, they're forecasted for an 18% growth in call volume just at that one station. So our main focus, our priority number 1 is to get that station to 24 hours. And then, look at the extreme ends, east, west end of the county, and grow in those areas.
What would it take to do that?
So it takes a whole nother ambulance. Mm-hmm. It takes about $500,000 in expenses. So a 24-hour truck costs about $700,000 year 1. So, we, and if we don't have, the household growth and the non-residential growth, if we don't capture more volume, that's cannibalizes revenue that we get from that. Now, it's not all business, right? This is about people's lives, but we do have to have, some balance, between the two of that. So, $700,000, if we don't get a ton more calls or get a good payer mix involved with that, then we have to start looking at some of our expenses.
Do the insurance companies usually pay the full amount that you ask for, or how does that work?
No, actually, it's rather abysmal. So,
And yet they keep making record profits.
Yeah, you probably saw me twitch a little bit right there.
I did.
So this is, and I'm really glad you asked that question. So the largest payer mix that we have, the largest payer that we have for the services that we provide is Medicare. So Medicare reimburses for us the calls that we run about $500, and it costs us about $900 to run a call. And there's nothing that we can do about that. They're fee schedule based. We can't influence that at all unless we, of course, we go to D.C., we lobby, we're part of all those groups that go to try to put pressure on the federal government to increase those rates. They only grow at about a rate of 2.5% on average every year, and our expenses grow higher than that every year. So,
What do you mean? Has there been inflation in America or something? Come on.
Not at all. So that and then and Medicaid, we're really lucky in the state of West Virginia that in 2022, West Virginia Medicaid decided to increase the ambulance fee up to match Medicare. Now, it's still only half of what it costs us to run the call, but it used to be a lot worse. So that was a huge blessing. But now commercial insurers, for instance, we were just in Charleston lobbying for to have commercial insurers have to pay 400% of Medicare. So that's some of the pressure that we have to put, for legislation for the state, so that way we can put the burden, on the insurance companies to cover the beneficiaries who are using our service.
Brendan, you had mentioned that recently there was the fees that were associated now with the county businesses as opposed to just individuals. So previously, if there was a need for an ambulance at a business, who was paying for that?
So that was that patient's insurance company.
And does the fee negate any of the insurance revenue that you get from the call?
So it does. So if that patient, and even if they were picked up out of a non-residential area, like let's say it was a manufacturing plant that that they were picked up from, and if it was a basic life support call and that patient's household fee is current, so they've paid their normal $110 fee that they get in July, we will bill their insurance up to the amount that the insurance will pay, and then we write off the remainder because that they've paid that. Now, if it's advanced life support, those calls are even more expensive, and we do have to pursue any co-insurance or co-payment or anything that the patient's responsible for based on the plan they have.
Does it change if the person is out of state but works in West Virginia?
It does not. So we will bill their insurance, and we have a great team of billing team members that can track that down. And get that information at the time of service, so that way we can bill their insurance.
What if someone is uninsured but they've paid their $110 fee? How is that billed?
So that gets a little difficult. So we try to work with everybody on a case by case basis to see what are they able to pay. Could they cover what insurance would pay? But typically for that we end up with a write off.
If you have, go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask if you have nothing. But you get your ambulance bill. What is a typical ambulance bill? Assuming it's not, you don't have to life flight somebody. It's a typical run to the hospital. What might that cost?
Yeah, so that's probably around the $600 range. If it's a BLS call, that's an average of 8 miles. It's about $500 on a flat rate, about $10 per mile, something like that. So you're looking at about the $580 to $600. Now, if it's a more advanced call, you could be looking up at $1,000. And if it's a long trip to the hospital, if we're coming from a really remote area of the county and we have to drive 20, 30 miles, to get to the hospital, that mileage will make that gross charge even higher.
But if I've paid my ambulance fee.
If you've paid your ambulance fee, and if it's a BLS call, we do not bill past insurance.
So the 20%, if any of you are listening, the 20% of people who don't pay the fee should pay the fee, so that if something happens.
That's the thing. You never know when you're going to need an ambulance.
No, and I know overwhelmingly your calls are Medicare, because overwhelmingly
Correct.
Seniors are more likely to need an ambulance. Mm-hmm. Has there been any talk with the federal government raising the Medicare reimbursement rate on that?
There has. So right now, actually just about 2 years ago, they started what's called the Ground Ambulance Data Collection System. So they contracted, the federal government contracted with a company to look into this to see what are actual costs on average across the country, which is really, it's hard to tell. If you see one EMS agency, you see one EMS agency. They're not all created equal. So right now there's a deep dive into that. For instance, we just had to submit our data to the federal government through that contractor that says, this is our salary costs, this is our capital requirements, this is the area that we cover. So they're looking at those rates. We don't know how that's going to turn out. But we are really hopeful for a big increase.
Well, I would think there should be, just by the fact that West Virginia is, we're a poorer state. So our costs may be a little lower than they are in some other states. Obviously, equipment costs are the same. So hopefully with some other states having much higher costs, maybe it'll raise. I got a question. Do we have a helicopter?
So yes, I used to fly in helicopters. So, yeah, so we have it is a private helicopter, so it's private EMS, and that's HealthNet. They're based out of Charleston, West Virginia, and they have about I think now 10 helicopters across the state. Don't quote me on that, but HealthNet 8 is based out of Martinsburg on the civilian side of the airfield out there next to the Air Guard, and they fly EMS missions and they do scene flights as well as interfacility transports.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier your revenue sources, basically coming from those fees, and then the other half, if you will, coming through billing. When especially it comes to equipment and replacing equipment, are you able to apply for grants or other means of getting some finances to help?
We are. So, and even even with the legislation, that does make us able to, to apply for grants, and we do regularly. But yes, that is an option.
Are they hard to get? I mean, everybody's trying to get them.
They're incredibly competitive. Yeah. So, I mean, especially when, if you're submitting for that and that selection committee is deciding on, someone who has a tax base and someone who does not, it just makes it incredibly competitive.
Okay.
Brandon, we are spending at the federal level $1.9 trillion more than we take in every year, and as a result of that, we got to cut back, man. And that includes discussions about everything. Nothing's off the table. That includes Medicare, Medicaid. How might cuts affect how you folks are able to perform your services?
Yeah, no, and yeah, thank you for asking that, because that's part of our strategic planning. So, eventually it's going to get to a place where there won't be enough clinicians to hire, and there won't be as many ambulances to buy. And we're going to fill up the whole county with the ambulances. So for us, we really want to get on the preventative side of that 911 call. If we could prevent the 911 call, that would drive down expenses. Now, of course, I'm not trying not to get anybody out of work here or anything, but it's the right thing to do. Lower the overall cost of care. And improve health. So one of our strategic initiatives right now is a program called Community Paramedicine. I've had the opportunity to start 2 of these programs, one at my previous employer and one on a consultant basis in a different part of the country. That's how you dabble in those things. See if you make a mistake, you can learn somewhere else, and they don't know you that way.
I like your attitude.
So just trying to do the best for the county.
Yeah, let them be the guinea pig, not us here.
If you make a mistake, you tuck tail and run. And luckily, it was wildly successful. So I had the opportunity to bring some of those things. So, but along with that, there has to come a lot of legislation behind that to compensate us, not just reimburse. They have to compensate us. We have to make a margin on those kinds of things, but have the compensation in such a way that it makes sense to do it. Respond to these low acuity calls with lower cost equipment, with less people, and just try to prevent the 911 call. But we need insurance companies to pay us fairly for that, and we need the resources to go and do that. So that is, and we need the local stakeholders. I just had a great meeting with the CEO of WVUH East, Mark O'Hearn. He's a great guy, and we're trying to partner with them right now on a strategy that would help us both. Help keep people out of the hospital, keep them home, but also allow us to complete that part of our mission. So we're trying to plan for that.
How do you get the insurance to pay their fair share? Who does the lobbying, the negotiating, the holding the feet to the fire to say, hey, buck up, let's go?
So we joined the West Virginia EMS Coalition, and that's ran by a guy named Chris Hall. He's with Orion Strategies, and they represent now 51 of the 55 counties. So, like I said, we were just down there for EMS Day, and we're just beating hallways down there, walking, asking questions, proposing legislation. All that stuff probably has to go through the Office of the Insurance Commissioner, through the state to require insurance companies to pay for those kinds of things. I know I actively try to contract with payers individually. But of course, when they're talking to Brandon from Hedgesville, it's kind of hard to get a hold of the right folks. I do have experience contracting with payers, but it's a grind, man. It really is to try to get them to pitch them on the value of that.
Yeah, that's something I think when it comes to health insurance and medical reimbursement, we all run into this, which is premiums go up all the time, way in excess of the rate of inflation. Yeah. And the reimbursements seem to become more difficult every time when you talk to doctors. They're like, I'm not getting money from them. The reimbursement rates I'm getting are incredibly low. You're talking about the fact that your rates are incredibly low. So where is all this money from excess premiums going?
Stadium naming rights.
Maybe.
How about call volumes? You mentioned earlier being able to have the 24-hour, the centralized location and so forth. What is your call volume?
So we respond to about 16. We're on track for about 16,000 responses this year. Now, not all of those result in a transport to the hospital. For instance, on the way in here, I was listening to the radio. One of our paramedics, who's phenomenal, just treated a patient with hypoglycemia. Treated the patient. They got to stay home and not be transported to the hospital because we're bringing those kind of resources to the scene. Now, that being said, about out of those 16,000 responses, about 8,600 result in a transport to the hospital. So that's rather high call volume for a county this size.
Now, the fee still exists for coming, correct? Is it a different fee if the ambulance is not transporting you?
So we're really blessed in the state. So we have a very I don't know if aggressive or maybe progressive is probably the right term, but Jody Ratliff is the Office of EMS Director, and he's located down in Charleston. And they've just they've worked really hard to pass some legislation that we can be compensated by an insurance company for what we call treat in place. So, but they have to fall in a certain criteria. They only fall in a certain number of chief complaints. They have to have a certain type of treatment that we delivered. But it's a great crawl, walk, run. But that's the kind of legislation that we need to continue to advance. And here in Berkeley County, that's why we travel down there a lot to try to help advance those initiatives.
Luckily, legislation advances very quickly, and so
lightning speed.
So you're talking years down the road before you may see some.
Yeah,
of this.
that's correct. But yeah, I mean that's the struggle that we face, and that's that's the mission that the leadership team at the Amstor, that's what we're tasked with, and that's why we're put in place to kind of make sure that we stay afloat, because it's a very challenging business to run. About 20 EMS agencies in the state of West Virginia have closed in the last 2 years. 20 agencies.
Who covers for them then?
They share responsibility. So what you might end up with is a 45-minute response time because you got an ambulance coming from 2 counties over.
Oh my goodness!
So we are incredibly blessed.
Minute and a half left. If there's anything that you need to make sure our audience heard or saw, do it now.
No, I mean, just if you want to contact your elected officials to have them apply pressure to to get us better reimbursement, not only at the state level but also at the federal level. If you contact your U.S. congressman to help us advance those things. If you want to share with some of your friends the message behind the household fees and the non-residential fees, that they really are to make up the difference between our expenses and what we get paid from insurance companies. And we always like a reach out to some of our first responders, because mental health is a big issue here that we try to help.
Very good. Hey, great to have you in the studio. Do you have a word there, John?
I just want to say we appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, we're very thankful to have really good ambulance service and services in our county. There are a lot of places in West Virginia that don't have this kind of service, and that's scary. Thank you. Thank you for what you do, man.
Appreciate it.
Steve Boykin says hello. He says he's done many rides with you.
Yes, sir. Good to see you,
man.
Steve.
Very good. Hey, thanks so much for coming in, Brandon.
Appreciate it.
And if you see the ambulance, by the way, in your rearview mirror, get out of the way.
Pull to the right.
Please pull over to the right.
Pull to the right.
Don't try to outrace it. That's not the goal there.